Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you are doing well, and it's time for a review of this new album from Björk, Fossora. This is the latest full-length LP from the legendary Icelandic singer, producer, songwriter Björk, her 10th. We have not heard a new LP from the art pop goat since 2017's flute-heavy Utopia, which was a pretty flowery and ornate change of pace from the sorrowful and heartbroken Volnicura just a few years prior. Post-pandemic, I was pretty curious to see what shape a new Björk record would take, especially considering the singles building up to this thing, like the very challenging and urgent Atopos, which sees avant-opera vocals soaring over these honking reed harmonies, and like a reggaeton groove being played out with these perks that are very loud, very rigid, not a whole lot of body to them. I presume because of the subtle gabber and hardcore techno influences that come out on this record here and there, especially in the latter half. Now, this very unlikely combination of sounds comes with a message about the increased isolation of society from itself. It seems in a post-quarantine and increasingly digital world, Björk is seeking some kind of human connection. The sentiment of the track is a little on the nose, but well-intentioned. And I mostly feel the same way about the following track, Ovule, which features a lot of very plainly spoken romantic imagery. The horn harmonies throughout the track are great, but a lot like the opener, the super rigid beats and one-dimensional progression of the track doesn't really leave a lot to be excited about. There's something about the movement of these tracks, or lack thereof, that just feels a bit off. Moments like the first two tracks here feel less like songs and more like a slightly pompous musical theater piece, which read like they were inspired by a vivid fever dream that continues building up tension for a release that never really comes. And rather than continue building on these sounds, we get a few sudden shifts in the track list instead. There is Mycelia, which is one of a handful of interludes on this thing. This one's like a bare synthesized vocal piece for the medulla heads. It's okay, but it passes by without much of anything stunning going on. Then Sorrowful Soil also leans pretty heavy into the group vocal passages. It is a bit longer, and the performance is legitimately beautiful, but its overall lack of development leaves this track feeling like a motif of sorts too. Though I will say the lyrics on this track do add to a pretty key theme on this LP, and that is motherhood, procreation, familial love. Björk works this angle in a pretty interesting way, not merely by just writing about it, but also by leaving space for a couple vocal features on this record from her own children. Sindri lends his own voice to the following ANCESTRESS, which in my opinion is the record's first real stunner, and I think it achieves these heights by avoiding the rigid progressions and overbearing beats that previous tracks on this thing embrace. The beautiful ascending melody and lush instrumentation on this track just develops in this very open and fluid way, and it just results in a very fantastical and enchanting 7 minutes that I love getting engrossed in. Lyrically, this track also seems to be in tribute to Björk's late mother, whose passing undoubtedly impacted the themes of this record. Things further disperse stylistically from here on the record, which makes it difficult to see really what direction things are going in. We have another very loose interlude before we get the cut Victimhood, whose very dark and evocative first half puts me in a vastly different place than any other track or moment on this record does. But the second half, where all of these various vocal leads and reed melodies are just layering over each other in a super chaotic way, yeah, this section is much less gratifying and feels almost at odds with itself, which may have something to do with the song's own commentary on victimhood and self-pity, which I think can read as sort of invalidating if taken a certain way. The second half on this thing is a bit stronger and is kicked off by the song Allow, which has a lot of very baroque and fluttering woodwinds on the intro, taking us right back into Utopia territory. Given the bright and hopeful vocals and lyrics, as well as the atmosphere surrounding this track, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a holdover from that era. And it's certainly nice while it's on, but its instrumental palette and mood just feels utterly disconnected from nearly every other moment on this record thus far. Fungal City featuring Serpent with Feet feels a bit more like it, given what the teasers of the album panned out to be. The reeds make a very bold return with some meticulously composed passages, intros. The beats take a more subtle approach at first, eventually building up to this really hardcore pounding sound and level of volume, which honestly I think was the move. The overall progression of the track is much more tasteful for it. Following this, we have by far the worst interlude on the entire record, which legitimately sounds like something off of a very creepy, spooky Halloween effects tape. But I suppose we do get some pretty strong closing moments on the LP. There's the stunning vocal and string combo on FREEFALL, which hits a very emotionally overwhelming peak, one of the most beautiful I've heard on a Björk record in a long time. Totally enamored with it, even if the track does kind of trail off toward the end. And it's the title track of the record, in my opinion, where those GABBER influences, those reeds, and those somewhat operatic vocals and harmonies come together in the most explosive and exciting way. The reed melodies are fantastic and very expansive. The beats take their time, reaching a very explosive peak. I get that maybe what this album is doing overall is far from Björk's most accessible sound palette, but it's intriguing all the same. We have a pretty low-key closer from here featuring vocals from Björk's daughter. We have lyrics on this track about home and instilling things like compassion and love into your children. It's obviously very clear this record is trying to convey something about raising kids, about child rearing, and certainly make a statement as well with this combination of very rigid beats and the reeds during key moments like the intro and the title track. But, when we look at the record as a whole, in my opinion, it doesn't really dig into these themes and sonic ideas all that deeply. By Björk standards, this doesn't really feel all that close to a complete idea, a totally explored concept. And historically, Björk is really truly someone who tends to drill down into things. We've seen it again and again and again, from Medulla to Volnacura to Biophilia. By comparison, Fossora just seems so much more surface level, even if it does deliver some mind-bending moments here and there. So as a result of that, as well as some very weak cuts that pale in comparison to others, and some ill-conceived ideas and some half-baked progressions here and there, I'm pretty on the fence with this record, honestly. So sadly, I am feeling like a light to decent 5 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Björk, Fossora, forever.